Hi, in a previous video I did an overview of the NuTone IK15 and IK25 entry door intercom systems, and as part of that video I talked about this. This is a model IS68 door speaker. The IS68 is used exclusively with the model IK15 and IK25 entry intercom systems, and today I'm going to show you how you can convert a standard modern NuTone door station that's used with all the current models of intercoms and with all sorts of older music intercom systems from a standard door speaker into a replacement for an IS68. The reason that this is important is because IS68s have been discontinued for about 10 years now, and as you can see with this used one, they get pretty weathered from being outside, and eventually parts of it will fail. And occasionally I'll see these for sale, say on eBay, and I see people asking for as much as $125 or $145 for one of these cheesy little brown plastic door speakers because they're really hard to find. So what really goes wrong with these? Well, it has the same problem that all other entry door stations and all other intercom stations have that are on the outside of a house. The push buttons get corroded and don't operate well. Of course, cosmetically they get real dodgy looking, so that's not very appealing. And then on the back they have this small speaker cone, and these, like all speaker cones and door speakers, eventually will fail. So whether yours has a speaker problem, a button problem, or both, when it fails, it needs to be replaced. And since buying one for $145 on eBay is kind of pricey and kind of ridiculous money, I thought I'd show you how you can convert a modern standard door speaker into an IS68. The thing that makes them different are that an IS68 is designed to work just on two wires, and the two wires give you both the door chime ring on the inside intercom stations as well as communications. That's different than a standard door speaker, which requires four wires to do the same thing. You have two dedicated wires for the door chime and two dedicated wires for the speaker for communication. So the way NuTone achieved this was by doing a little bit of rewiring of how the speaker and the push button interact together, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. So if you have one of these, when you take it off the wall, what you'll see is you have the speaker cone here, and there's a black wire that goes to one of the terminal connections on one side of the push button, and then there's a little brown pigtail wire. This would attach to one of the two wires that comes out of the wall on the front of your house. And then from the other speaker terminal there are these two blue devices, and these are capacitors. The capacitors provide isolation so you can have two functions on the same pair of shared wires. So the capacitor comes off, the first one comes off one of the terminals of the speaker cone. It goes down, it's spliced onto the second one, which goes across and is connected to the other terminal of the push button, where there is also another brown pigtail wire, which is the one that would be connected to the other wire coming out of the hole in the wall on the outside of your house. So I'm going to show you how, with a little bit of effort and a couple extra bits and pieces, how you can convert a standard door station into a replacement for this. For our example speaker today, we're going to use this brand new white NuTone entry door station. This is a model NDB300WH, and I'm going to use this one today because the white shows up best in the video, so it will be easier for you to see what I'm going to do to it. You can use any of the four new entry door speakers that NuTone makes. The white one is a plastic grilled. They also make three metal grilled speakers, which are available in polished brass, antique brass, or what NuTone calls nickel, which really is more like chrome on the bumper of your car. So any of those will work, and they certainly are all a big improvement in appearance over the ugly little brown IS68s that originally came out in like 1974. So let me go ahead and set this up, and I'll show you how this differs from the IS68 and then what we're going to do to it. When you do something like this, we're going to reconstruct this on the workbench here. You'll want to put something down to protect the face of your brand new door speaker that you just bought. You know, this is going to be on the outside of the front porch of your house, and you don't want to scratch it all up. So let's look at what's different about this compared to the IS68. You still have a speaker cone here, and on the new replacement, on the new door speakers NuTone makes today, you get a couple of wires that are already soldered onto the terminals, which is going to help us out. And this is the location where the push button is. In this particular example, there's a plastic cover over the actual button itself. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that because it's going to be in our way. If you buy one of the metal grilled speakers, it doesn't have a cover over it. You'll just see the back of the button. So here we have the back of the push button, and you can see it has two screw terminals, one here and one here. A little different configuration because it's a newer button, but basically it's the same idea as this. So what we have to do to convert this is we have to use these wires and add a couple capacitors to the system to make it work like an IS68. So let's go ahead and see what else you're going to need to be able to do a task like this. So to do this this conversion to the door speaker, you're going to need basically a pair of wire cutters. I have a couple different kinds here which I like to use, and they have different purposes. This is mostly for cutting, this is for stripping, and I'm going to use that one. And then you're going to need a smaller size Phillips screwdriver which fits into the screws on the back of the push button nicely. You are going to need a couple capacitors, and I'll put down in the video description down below what these are and a resource for a place that you can order them. It used to be that you could go down to your local Radio Shack and buy something like this. These two would probably cost you a couple dollars. There aren't that many Radio Shacks left anymore. If you have one in your area, you certainly can get these there. Or if you have another sort of general purpose electronic supply store in your area. These are very common parts and should be very easy to get as long as the rating is correct, but I'll put all that information in the show notes down below. So you'll need two of those. Also, you need to understand that to do this properly, it involves a little bit of soldering. And soldering is not something that everybody really does. So if you don't solder, perhaps you know someone who does, a friend or a neighbor. You can't really do this properly unless you can make some of the connections by soldering. So I'm going to show you how to do that, but if you don't solder yourself, perhaps you know somebody who does. So the very first thing we have to do is, let's clear our workspace, is we have to remove the little light bulb that's inside the button. The buttons on IS68s can't have light bulbs in them. They are unlit buttons, and that holds true for your new one also. So that's the very first thing we're going to do, is remove the button. Let me go ahead and get this set up so you can actually see me do that, and then we'll move on to the next step. So here's a close-up view of the button, and you can see one screw terminal here, the other screw terminal here, and right here in a little recessed hole, there's also a matching hole on this side, is where the little tiny light bulb is. And we have to remove that. So to do that, I'm going to try to do this without blocking the view too much. What you have to do is you have to loosen the screw. Oops. See, sometimes the button wants to spin around and around. So let me loosen it like this. Alright, so let's set our button back up like we had it. Okay, so I've got the screws loosened. Of course, they were very tight. Okay. See, this is fussy work. And then if you take a really small screwdriver, you can reach down in there and put the screwdriver underneath the wires that come out of the base of the bulb. And then in this case it sort of flopped out. And there's the little tiny light bulb. This doesn't have any purpose for what we're doing anymore, so you can hold on to it if you really want to, or you can do what I'm going to do, which is probably toss it away. Alright, so now we have an unlit button as we need to have, and the first thing we're going to do is set up the first wire that comes off the speaker cone. So the first thing to do is we're going to duplicate this connection. We have a black wire that comes off the left-hand speaker terminal, and it sort of loops around, and it's connected to a little connector that's screwed to this screw on this side of the push button. Let's call it the top screw. And then in the little connector there's this brown pigtail wire that's left loose. So we're going to duplicate this, but we're going to be a little smarter about it and make it a little simpler than the way NuTone did it. What we're going to do is we're going to take this black wire, the one on the left, and we're going to loop it around and connect it to this top screw. So we're duplicating what they did here originally. Now you could cut the wire, strip back the end, put a connector on it, try to find one that's small enough to fit under the screw, and then put another piece of wire and make it up exactly like they did here, but it's not really necessary to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the wire strippers, and we're just going to strip back a small section of the wire and loop it under the screw. These type of cutters are going to cut the insulation, but they're not going to cut the wire, the metal part of the wire that's inside the insulation. So we're going to figure out that if we loop it around this much, that's pretty good. So we want to strip it back about right here. And in this case, I forgot, the ends of these wires have a little bit of solder on them to make them so they don't fray. So you can probably see here how I've cut the insulation with the wire strippers, but the metal wire itself is still intact, and by doing that you can slide it down to expose more of the bare wire. Once you've done that, take the end of the wire and twist it just a little to twist up the wire here. We'll back off our screw just a little more, and we'll take this, the bare part of the wire that we've pulled the insulation back from, and we'll wrap it underneath the head of the little screw. Let's back the screw off a little bit more to give ourselves a little more space. Like that. So now you can see it's looped, the bare part of the wire is looped under the screw, and then we'll tighten the screw back down, and we've now essentially duplicated what we had here. Again, it's the black wire off the left speaker terminal. It loops around, it connects to one side of the button, and then comes back out of that connection to the brown pigtail. So here we have the same thing, but we've done it with one piece of wire instead of two, which I think makes us rather clever. So again, left-hand speaker terminal, the wire loops around, it's connected under the screw on the button, and then comes back out the other side. So this is essentially our brown pigtail. So that's pretty easy. When it comes time to hook this up, you'll need to strip back the insulation on the end of the wire like this, and perhaps a little more. So now we have the bare end of a wire, and this will connect to one of the two wires that comes out of the hole in the wall on the front porch of your house. So one side is done. That was the easy side. Now we're going to do the other side. The other side involves the capacitors and then the wire also. So in this particular case, we're fortunate because we have this red wire, which we're going to reuse as a replacement for this other brown pigtail wire, but we have to add the capacitors in. So what we're going to do is we're going to clip this off and put it aside for a second. And if you look here on the speaker terminal, you'll see the red wire was originally attached here, and it was soldered onto this lug. But here we have a second lug and it has a hole in it, and that's what we're going to use to solder our capacitors in. So let's take a quick look at capacitors. So here are our two capacitors. They're both the same. Just as a point of interest, these are 100 microfarad, which is a value that's assigned to capacitors, and they're rated for up to 25 volts. These are exactly the same ratings as the original capacitors in an IS68, so we don't need to reinvent everything here. We're just duplicating what NuTone had already designed. These are referred to as electrolytic capacitors, which mean that they have polarity. They have a plus and a minus end, just like the plus and minus end on a D-size battery. And you'll notice that on this one, it has this stripe with arrows pointing to the right, and the arrows denote the negative side. So it's important to make sure that we put these together properly, otherwise they won't do the job that they're supposed to. Another way that they're identified is these are basically a long aluminum tube, and at this end of the tube it's crimped somewhat. There's a little recess here. You may not be able to see it very well, but all of this type of capacitor have that. These are also referred to as axial capacitors. Axial means that the wires come out of each end, just like the axle of your car. So these are old school capacitors. They're not used much anymore in modern products, but for this application they work best. So we're going to assemble these in the same exact manner as the original ones in the IS68, and then we're going to install them in the speaker. If we take a close look at the capacitors in the original IS68, you'll see that the negative arrow on the first one is pointing away from the speaker cone. And here's the little crimped area in the body of the capacitor. So this is the positive side. This is the negative side. And on the second one, the negative side is also pointing in this direction. And then here's the crimped area, and it's the positive. So the way this is set up, the positive end of the first one is connected to the speaker cone. The negative ends of each capacitor are twisted together right here, and the positive end of the second capacitor is the one that goes to the button. So that's what we're going to do to make up when we make up our two new replacement capacitors. Now we know, because we just saw it in the original IS68, the negative ends of the capacitors are going to get twisted together. So here are our two brand new capacitors, and I have them, I'm holding them so that negative arrows both are going up to the top. So these are the negative leads. So all you have to really do is hold them together, take the leads, cross them, and then twist them together like that. And that's good enough for now. We'll worry about the soldering at the end. And then, so they fit into the speaker properly, all we're going to do is open them up. And there's our replacement for the original one. If I bring this back over here, you can see it's the same. It's positive, positive, negative, negative, negative again to match this one, so the two negative ends are twisted together like we did here, and this positive end is the same as this, and it's going to connect to the button. So this is our replacement capacitor pair for the original ones. So now it's time to put the capacitors into the new speaker. So what we're going to do is, well, first we're going to take this and we're going to connect the negative or the positive end onto the speaker terminal, just like in the original one. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to bend this over a little bit. I'm going to put it through the hole in the lug of the speaker terminal and just bend it over to hold it in place. Remember, we're going to be soldering this when we get all done, so right now this is just to hold it in place to make it easy for you. Let's go ahead and back off the screw a little bit more. Alright, now we're going to take this one and we're going to hook it over, and we're going to put it underneath the screw on the push button. This is actually not as difficult as it may seem in the video because I'm standing off to the side, which makes it more complicated for me to do than if I was standing right over it, but then you couldn't see. Alright, so now we've wrapped the positive end of the second capacitor underneath the screw, so we're almost there, but we're missing one important bit. We need the second pigtail wire coming off the same side of the button that we just connected the capacitor to, and that's where we're going to use our red wire. So I'm going to go ahead and strip the insulation back on this. Usually about 3/4 of an inch is good. So there we are. I'm going to twist it a little bit to tighten up the strands of the wire. A trick on doing this is most people would take this and put their fingers on the end of the bare wire and twist and twist and twist. That's okay. It's easier if you just hold the wire and you twist the rest of the wire between your thumb and forefinger, and that'll twist it up nice and tight. We'll make a hook on the wire. We'll put it under the screw and we'll tighten the screw down. And there we are. We've duplicated our IS68 with a brand new NuTone Door Station. So to review, the wire from the left-hand speaker terminal comes down, connects to one side of the button and loops back out, which gives us our first pigtail connection. Our brand new capacitors are connected to the right-hand speaker terminal, positive to the speaker terminal, negative and negative twisted together. The positive end of the second capacitor is under the other screw on the push button, which also has our second pigtail wire. So our last step to do this is the soldering step. And while it may not seem important, if you don't have a soldering iron, people, oh, it's not that important, it'll be all right. Well, what happens is if you don't solder here where it's twisted, eventually, because this is on the outside of your house, you'll start to get corrosion in the twisted wires because they're not sealed with the solder. And over here you have a rather loose connection. It sort of wiggles around and you'll get static and it won't operate very well. Also, you'll get corrosion here. So soldering is not really complicated, but you do need a soldering iron to do it, which I have here. So all you really have to do is heat it up just a little and throw a little blob on there like that, and we're going to do the same thing down here. Alright, and that's really all there is to it, but you have to have a soldering iron to do this. You also have to remember that it's just a door speaker. Soldering is not that difficult, and you can see it took me, what, 10 seconds to do that? It's just a door speaker. We're not building a satellite here. It's not going into space. It's just a door speaker. So a little bit of quick soldering and that's it. So that's how you convert a standard NuTone modern entry door station into a functioning IS68. You can buy this door speaker. I think it cost about $45 or so, which is a lot better than $145 for a ugly brown IS68. You will need a surface mounting box to go along with this, which happens to be NuTone model number NES 300DWH, because we need those really long model numbers to make it all really confusing. Or if you wanted to cut a hole in your wall, you could do a flush mount installation. Either of those will work. But this certainly is a better alternative, and if you factor in the idea that you could use maybe a polished brass or an antique brass and it'll be much nicer looking on your front porch, it's a good way to go. I hope you found this to be interesting and helpful. Please consider doing this before you go and pay some outrageous amount of money for an IS68 on eBay. If you liked our video, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube. If you find our other videos to be interesting and helpful, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's all for today. See you on the next video. Wait, one more thing, I almost forgot. Since you sat through the video on how to convert your standard NuTone brand new door speaker into a replacement for an IS68, I thought it would only be fair to show you that it actually works. So here's the one that we just did in the video. It's got the capacitors and the wiring as we did, which you can do yourself, and I have it hooked up here to a NuTone IK15. It's also compatible with the IK25, and just to show you that it actually does work, I'm going to go ahead and ring it. Warning, there will be feedback in this video, so get ready. So push the button. You get the chime tones on the inside station. Push to talk. Oh, there's the feedback. It'll be over in a second. And that's it. The feedback's just because the speakers are too close to each other. If this was in your entry and this was in your front porch, it wouldn't happen. It's just because they're too close to each other. Anyway, I thought it would be only fair to show you that it actually does work. That's all. Thanks for watching.